Hello, it is Dr. Jimmy. Greetings, I hope you're all doing well. It is Saturday, the 12th of August, which means that Halloween Horror Nights will be starting in just 4 weeks in Japan. Yes, 4 weeks from today will be on September 9th, the beginning of the first of 4 Halloween Horror Night events internationally. The one in Orlando starts, though, in 4 weeks and 6 days. The following Friday, September 15th. Also that same day will be the one in Hollywood. The one in Singapore, however, won't start for 6 weeks and 6 days on September 29th. But enough of that. We're talking about the past, not the future. This is one of my history videos. First, a little bit of history. From Halloween Horror Nights 24 is my lovely t-shirt here, American Werewolf in London. Now, Halloween Horror Nights 24, they didn't have American Werewolf in London that year. No, they didn't. On the back of the shirt, though, it says Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights 2014, and it was sold at the event of Halloween Horror Nights 24. Even though they didn't have the house there in 2014, they had the house the year before, 2013, and then again the year after, 2015. Why did they sell it the year they didn't have a house? Well, I believe it's because they like to have some shirts they can sell both at Hollywood and Orlando. And in Hollywood in 2014, they had American Werewolf that year. And so they made the shirt to be sold at both parks, even though the maze was in Hollywood and not in Orlando that year. Anyway, it's an official Halloween Horror Nights t-shirt, and it's quite nice. And they did have Werewolf there twice, the year before, the year after. I think they sold it in 25, and they put 25 on the back. I didn't bother getting it because the front was exactly the same. All right, now, this will be my 8th video in the history of the event, Universal Orlando Halloween Horror Nights 25, the event that was held at Universal Studios Florida in the year 2015. In previous videos, I've covered 4 haunted houses, and I was just starting in on the 5th, Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears. A wonderful house. At least I think some people include it on their list of worst houses ever. But there's no accounting for taste, I suppose. But before I get to that, there's a couple things I want to touch on first. First of all, just go back to the future for a moment. Back to the future? Dun 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 dun. No, not that one. No, not Marty McFly. But actually, let's go back to 27 for a moment. Last night, something wonderful happened on Twitter. You know, the Horror Nights ORL Twitter feed is run by their social media team nowadays. Last night, it was like going back to last year when someone else used to run it. You know, I don't know if it was Mike Aiello getting back on last night. I don't know because it didn't say, but it felt like him. It sounded like him, talking about the passion of all the fans and then showing us some sneak peeks of inside the haunted houses that are coming up this year. I don't know if it was Mike. I hope it was Mike. If it was Mike, he really made my day. It was awesome. He showed 4 images from interior, prop and set design and stuff going on right now in creating haunted houses for Halloween Horror Nights 27, 2 of which are houses I'm fairly certain were already announced intellectual properties, specifically The Shining and Ash vs. Evil Dead. They were pretty obvious because it had, you know, the old-fashioned reel-to-reel tape recorder. Remember the one from Evil Dead that had the recording of the incantation that caused all the problem in the first place? And it did show up in episodes of the 2nd season of Ash vs. Evil Dead when they went back to the cabin. So that, I think, is for that house. I'm pretty sure it is, actually. There was some dialogue from the you know, that was there that is associated with that particular recording device. The other showed, interesting enough, another old-fashioned device. It was an old-fashioned electric typewriter, and oh, wouldn't you notice, some of the keys were pushed down. R, E, D, and U and M. What does that spell? Red dumb? Or if you have 2 R's, red rum. And he even captioned it, all work and no play. So we know that's a shining prop So there are two other images, though, from houses that have not yet been released, and I strongly suspect original houses and rather than IPs. One show it looked like a sort of jungle scene, or maybe a swamp, like, oh, I don't know, bayou maybe, some heavy vegetation, something like a skull. Very interesting. What could that be? And the other one was labelled Dust to Death. And it showed like a figure sort of hanging with a horrifying mask, like, and a human face under the mask, sort of hanging up like on a post or something, like, I don't know, to scare birds away from crops or something. That's just my guess. So those are the two images of houses that have not yet been revealed. I'm quite gleeful to see this. At last we're getting something, some tease, at least something, because it's been weeks and we haven't heard, since Ash was revealed, we haven't heard very much, and it's getting close, it's getting closer and closer to time. When are we going to have more house announcements? All of Singapore's been announced, all of Japan's been announced. Everything but 3 mazes has been announced for Hollywood. Only 3 houses have been announced in Orlando. There's 6 more houses we've got. We've got scare zones and shows and God knows what else. Maybe there's going to be another upcharge house. We don't know. Whatever is coming up for Orlando, all of it is mystery, except for 3 houses. And so yeah, any little tidbit of information is most welcome. So that little bit of fun happened last night. Now let's get back to Halloween Horror Nights 25. Again, before I continue Run, Blood, Sweat and Fears, I forgot something back in part 7. Oh. Yes, I talked about wrapped up Freddy versus Jason, and I talked all about Body Collector's Recollections, but I forgot the cocktails. Yes, of course, I made cocktails for both of those houses. Now, the cocktail I made for Freddy versus Jason. It says here, for Freddy versus Jason, a combination of divergent elements in hostile combination. I thought that would be an interesting thing. So the ingredients were vodka, Sambuca, Jägermeister, and Bailey's Irish Cream. So I thought those being very divergent elements in conflict with each other, like Freddy and Jason. Of course, I had to use what they had available at Finnegan's. And so I have it for you now, and I'm smart now. I realize, oh, iPhone is okay, but iPad is so much better to give you a better graphic. So this is the Freddy versus Jason cocktail I created with all those ingredients. And you know what? It tasted pretty good. You wouldn't think that having all that in there would be a good tasting cocktail. You think those flavors would clash and it wouldn't turn out so well. So let's find, here we go. Here we go, the cocktail for Body Collector's Recollections. And what I have written here is, in 1855, a cocktail would have been strictly defined as a spirit, syrup, and bitters. You see, back in the 19th century, that's what a cocktail was. It had to have a spirit and syrup and bitters. Sounds like an old-fashioned. Well, why do you think it's called an old-fashioned? See, the first cocktail was invented by a man named Peychaud in New Orleans, and that's what he did. He took brandy and some syrup and some bitters. He created them himself. And his Peychaud bitters, and that was, he called a cocktail or something like that, and that's where the word comes from. This man in New Orleans invented the frickin' cocktail. That might have even been the 18th century, but it caught on. So for Body Collector's Recollections, I followed this classic formula. And to signify the great frozen blizzard and make it insane, because of course psychoscarapy, right? It had to be insane. It was in Shady Brook. The spirit chosen was Rumpelminze, of all things. So here was my classic cocktail recipe, and let's make it brighter. Here we go. And there it is. You see, ooh, it looks quite lovely, isn't it? So it was Rumpelminze, which had a code flavor, and to that was added some syrup, some simple syrup, yes, simple syrup, and some bitters, probably Angostura bitters. So it came up quite lovely, and it garnished with a cherry for little Jack, who was a little baby in the house. It looks quite well. It was actually delicious, a little minty and fresh and lovely, and it evoked the house quite well, I thought. So those were the two cocktails I forgot to mention last time round. All right, now let's get back to Run, Blood, Sweat and Fears. The very title actually is a bit of a gag, because it makes you think of that old band, Run, Sweat and Tears. And they had a great hit song back in the 70s. You know, what goes up must come down, spinning wheel, turning round. Yeah, but that has nothing to do with the house, so let's get over that right away. Just like to sing a tune once in a while. Getting back to the haunted house, and I had left off just starting talking about the marvelous Q video. Now, I will do my best to describe this amazing house. This incredibly detailed house with an incredibly detailed and elaborate backstory, and go about all the stuff about this as best to my memory and knowledge. But I will probably drop a few things here and there. I'd probably forget some details because my memory's not perfect. And also that wonderful Q video, which I understand was 45 minutes long. 45 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, that would make it the longest Q video of any haunted house in the history of Halloween Horror Nights. It was a very elaborate production. It even had all sorts of running things and little subplots and all kinds of stuff. It was amazing. It's almost like a feature film. I don't know if anyone managed to videotape the whole thing, obviously. There might be bits and pieces on YouTube, and you'd have to try to put them all together. What I would really hope is that somewhere, someday, some nice person at Universal will show the whole thing, so we can see it on YouTube or post it, and we could watch through the whole 45 minutes. It's really amazing. I never saw the whole thing all the way through myself, I must confess. As I mentioned the previous video, not the most recent, but the last one in the history series, part 7, I am a 54-year-old man who walks with a bit of a limp. I am old, I am fat, and I use Express because I can afford it, and also because it's a long bloody wait, you know. Back around 2007, 2006 was the last, 2007 was the last time I attempted to stand on queues without using Express, the first night of Halloween Horror Nights 17. The year before, I had gotten my Express for the first time because I didn't think I had time to get through the whole night, and I wasn't sure I'd be coming back any more nights in 2016. I'm sorry, 2006, and that's true. I was only able to go one night that year, and so I did get Express for the first time so I could do all the houses. But in 2007, I thought, yeah, I have several days, I don't have that problem. So I went through, and by the time I got to my, I think it was the second house of the night, which happened to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the same location, except back then it was called the Earthquake Queue area. And there was very long queue, and I got so hot and so exhausted in such a long queue, and even though I had good times talking to other guests about stuff, all kinds of stuff, and they knew that I'd been there before, and they talked about Horror Nights and all of this. What's your favorite? Because I had an old shirt on from like 2005 or something, and I was talking to them about all kinds of stuff, and it was like, I can't do this anymore. And I went and got an Express for the rest of the night, and I've never gone back. It's Express almost always, and especially for those really long queues. And the disaster queue was a long queue. You go back and forth and back and forth, and sometimes it would go for, an hour or more on a very busy night, and especially, it'd go very early in the evening, or sometimes at the end of the night you could get through faster. But that's why they had that Q video. That's where the best Q videos had almost always been. Like the zombie training program for Zombiegeddon. That was an excellent Q video also in 2010. And H.R. Blood and Guts' all his wonderful Q videos in 2011. They almost always had some really neat Q videos in that occasion, because you had a lot of time to watch them, and you needed to have something to distract you from the fact you're standing on a bloody line and it's really hot and whatever else it is. So, yeah, you don't even have the wonderful sounds of Rocky Horror next to you anymore nowadays. So, and that one, going back and forth and back and forth, you could see this Q video, but not me. I'm in the express lane. I just zip right by, say hello, hello, hello people, nice people, hello, that's nice, bye-bye, I'm going in the house now. Boop. And that's how I got it, and I might see a glimpse of the Q video. Even if I'm with someone who doesn't have express, I would not go into that particular queue unless it was earlier in the evening, because it was a house you could do in brighter light. There's a lot of light leaking in the house, but that one wasn't so bad. So I went through, although I almost walked into the poor victims area in the Gladiator scene because of light differential. The one time I went in during the daylight hours, almost walked right into the poor bastard and said, "Dr. Jimmy, where are you going?" And that was, Scotty, who was with me, and pulled me out of there before I got impaled on the spikes myself. The guy's desperately shooting water at me, trying to make me realize I'm walking into him. I can't see. Or I'm distracted by the hot gladiator, whatever it was. But actually, even when I went in those times, it was early in the evening, so maybe 1 or 2 lanes, and that was all it took, not going back and forth for an hour and a half. But those people who did take the time to go through the queue could watch that video, and it was 45 minutes long, including also lots of hit music from the 1980s with a DJ playing music from the 80s like, "It's the final countdown!" Yeah, that was one of them, and I don't remember all the tunes, but I understand Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal was in there, all kinds of music from the 1980s, especially around 85, 86, 87, because that seems to be right about when this house took place, in the alternate universe, year 1987. Excuse me. So before I get into that and do my best, I will now tell you where you can find a lot more information about this house than I will be able to give you. I will do my best, but I highly recommend, this is a shout out, I highly recommend that you find a YouTube channel by a person named Andrew R. Davis. Andrew R. Davis, and he was a scare actor in the house himself. He was one of the Blitzkrieg brothers, yes. The Blitzkrieg Brüder, yeah. Very nice German lad. And Andrew has that YouTube channel. And if you find the YouTube channel, a bald man with sort of a blonde goatee, a little blonde beard, and he usually wears a t-shirt that looks like Black Adam. If you read DC Comics, it's a black t-shirt with a lightning bolt like Captain Marvel has. If you're DC Captain Marvel, Shazam Captain Marvel, not the Marvel Captain Marvel, which is a girl, a different character altogether. We're talking about the DC Comics Captain Marvel, which is older, ancient, older, more traditional. The red suit with the white cape, and Billy Batson says Shazam and turns into Captain. That one. And one of his arch villains is Black Adam, who has similar powers, but he has like a black leotard with a big lightning bolt, like Captain Marvel, but his powers are a little different. They get them from Egyptian gods instead of Greek and Roman gods, and he was once a pharaoh. Rumor has it The Rock will be playing Black Adam in the upcoming DC Cinematic Universe Shazam movie. That sounds like awesome casting to me. It would be really neat to see that. Although I don't know if he might be better as Eye-Back, if they do Eye-Back. He just has to have a mohawk, if you know your DC Comics. But it looks like that. It also might remind you of, there was another comic book back in the day. It was one of those alternate comics, not mainstream. I forget who the publisher was, and I don't even. And there was a guy with like a sword or something, and he had that. He wore a T-shirt, not a leotard, with the lightning bolt. And for the life of me, I can't remember the damn name of the stupid comic book. But it'll come to me one of these days. I might mention it later, but it reminded me of that. So, bald man, black T-shirt, big lightning bolt. That's what you want to look for. Although the video I'm pointing you in question, that's to help you find the channel. Andrew R. Davis. Just in case there's somebody else on YouTube named Andrew Davis who doesn't wear a black T-shirt with a lightning bolt on it. The right one is the bald guy, you know, little blonde beard, and just a little wisp of a beard, not like a big bushy beard, but just a little bit, and he's got the black T-shirt with the lightning bolt. So look for that, okay? And the video in question, though, was posted on November 23rd, 2015. Thus, you know, a few weeks after Horror Nights 25 ended. And the video is titled, it's all in capital letters, like he's shouting, it's titled, "Why Was Run the Superior House at HHN number, or hashtag number 25. And then in parentheses, in normal script, House Explained. Yes, that's the video I recommend you go and take a look at. It's only 9 minutes and 2 seconds long. Thus, I've already talked more than twice as long as that video itself. And it will tell you all kinds of information about Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears that you didn't know about. Stuff I didn't know about. Ooh, I learned stuff watching that because he was in the house and he knew all the little secret things, the little Easter eggs, and all the little backstory stuff that I didn't even know about, didn't realize. Even though I went through that house dozens of times that year, as many times as I could, because I liked it so much. There's stuff I would have missed, especially because I didn't know where to look, and also because, you know, I didn't spend all that time in the Q video, and then realized that it pertained to what was in the house later on. So, yeah, his video is very good. I recommend it. So, after you're through watching this video, and likely part 9, because there's no way I'm going to finish Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears. It's already 22 minutes now in this video. So, after you see what I say about Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears in this video, as well as probably part 9 also, then go see Andrew Davis's video that I mentioned to you about why Run was the superior house. And he's a bit biased, yes, because he was in the house, yes, but he has a point. He has it's like right here on his forehead. But no, he's got a good point, and I do recommend it to you. So that's my shout out to my friend Andrew. Now, let's me talk about Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears. Finally! Alright, the Q video does tell you quite a bit, and from what I've gathered in seeing bits and pieces of it, either online or when I was walking through, is this whole scenario takes place, as I said, in an alternate timeline. Okay, it's like one of those parallel universes where some divergence point in history. There was a divergent point creating a different history after that. It's set around the year 1987 or 86, probably 87 I believe, and the divergent point would have been in the early 1960s. In our own universe, this world that we live in, John Kennedy was President of the United States, and there was a crisis when the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, sent missiles, nuclear missiles. Doesn't that sound topical today? Where it's like this, the Cuban Missile Crisis is, of course, the time we came closest to nuclear war. Until now! If we survive what's going on with Trump and Kim Jong-un, and we don't have a nuclear holocaust, and we're not all killed, maybe 20, 30 years in the future, they'll have a House at Halloween Horror Nights, an alternate history where things were different. I don't know. But let's go back to it. Sorry, I got scared because of what's going on right now. I suddenly realized how topical this whole idea is now. Didn't think about that before, but yeah. The Cuban Missile Crisis, for those of you who are young kids and never bothered reading your history books in school like you're supposed to, what happened is that John Kennedy was president, and Khrushchev began, and that was at the time of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and USA were at loggerheads over nuclear weapons. The Soviets had stolen nuclear plants. We had been the only ones with nuclear weapons after the war. And then some spies, nuclear spies, had given information to the Soviet Union. They started making their own nuclear weapons, and we started an arms race. Oh my God, who could have more missiles than the other? How many times could we blow up the Earth? So this was getting ridiculous and out of hand already. And we were always worried that the Soviets might get the upper hand. If they get the upper hand, they might attack us. But, you know, if they attacked us, there wouldn't be anything left afterwards. But we were told to duck in cover, and that we would be safe, which was bullshit, of course, because, you know, impact craters about, you know, 2 miles deep. You have nowhere to duck in cover that you'll survive. But getting back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, these missiles were being sent to Cuba. Now, of course, here in Florida, we know Cuba's just right outside the door. That's Cuba's right next door. And it's always a bone of contention in politics, even to this day. And they were getting the missiles to put in Cuba that could fly, like, you know, in seconds and bomb Florida and bomb anywhere on the east coast of the United States. And we're like, holy fuck, we can't have that. And the president was like, we will not tolerate, you know, these weapons here. And it started this conflict between Russia and the United States. We came very close to nuclear war. But instead of making crazy threats about fire and fury, instead of going on, and they started talking to each other behind the scenes, and they came to an agreement. And and Russians were really upset because there were nuclear weapons right on their border in Turkey. And so they said, okay, fair's fair. Get those out of Turkey, we'll take them out of Cuba. They did. Peace was restored. We went back to our tensions in the Cold War, but no nuclear. It was no hot war, just Cold War, until eventually, of course, we won the Cold War and the Soviet Union collapsed. Except now they're worse than ever before because they're not communists, they're insane criminal capitalists. But let's not go there. Let's put that aside. Both of us are. That's the problem. Oh dear. So getting back to the storyline. So the divergent point in the history of Run, Blood, Sweat and Tears is that Kennedy did not negotiate with Khrushchev, didn't say anything about taking one missile out. No, his solution to the Cuban Missile Crisis was a preemptive strike, and he launched the nuclear weapons, and they flew, and there was a nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union, and bombs going off, and fortunately, the world was not destroyed. We did survive, thankfully. Otherwise, there'd be no house. But much of the United States, lots of it was devastated, but not irreparably. There are many places in the United States that were safe. And there were other places that got a bit messed up, but there could be nice underground shelter areas and communities below the ground where people had underground cities. And here in Florida, those of us on the island of Orlando could enjoy that because, yes, everything, you know, in the Panhandle, Jacksonville's gone, Miami's gone. Florida's an island. Central Florida is all that's left. Orlando is the capital. So the island of Orlando, that's nice. So we still existed, but the rest of the country is pretty much intact. But Russia, the Soviet Union, was utterly devastated, reduced to a radioactive wasteland of mutants and maniacs. Okay? Eventually, the United States government of democracy, that whole thing collapsed. Capitalism, the corporations that are secretly behind everything moved into the forefront. It's like the new founding fathers or something. They take over. It becomes the corporate states of America. And so big business runs the world, and America runs the world. And that's where we are in 1987. But there were problems. There were lots of undesirables, mutants, you know, radioactive mutants and criminals, and anyone who didn't agree with the government. They were thrown in prisons, and they had trouble. They had to get rid of all those nasty people. The prisons were getting too full. They started killing them off. How could they do this? Well, they came up with a rather clever, entertaining idea of doing it on television and making a profit off of it. Ha! And that was what the whole Reaper program was. And they got people to come from all over the world to kill the undesirables on television. And soon they wiped most of these people out. And they could just have, you know, political prisoners in whatever prisons that were still used as prisons, but they didn't have to have as many, you see. And that's where we come to. But every year there's a celebration called Freedom Day. Yes, and they celebrate the victory of what is now the corporate states of America over what is now the radioactive Soviet wasteland. And they have a special edition of Run, the game show, where they kill off, and of course now what do they get the people? They're volunteers, of course. They get people to volunteer. Why would you ever want to volunteer since you're likely to get killed? Oh, if you survive, you get lots of money and prizes. If you get killed, maybe your family gets lots of money and prizes. See, it's all they need to keep. They need to keep the cash cow going. The show has high ratings. It makes lots of money for the corporate states of America. I'll continue this in part 9. Told you I couldn't get through it.